The emergency lights bathed the Grand Council chamber in red as alarms echoed through the massive space station. Supreme Counselor Thane of the Luminar stood at the central podium, his luminescent skin flickering with anxiety. Around him, representatives from 43 species shouted in dozens of languages, their translation devices struggling to keep pace with the chaos. "Order! I demand order!" Thane's voice boomed through the amplification system, finally cutting through the noise. The chamber fell into tense silence. "We must approach this rationally. Panic serves no purpose." A holographic display materialized above the podium, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. At its edge, a cluster of red dots represented the unknown fleet. There were so many dots that they blurred together into a crimson cloud. Commander Vros of the Cretan Empire stood, his reptilian features twisted in anger. His scales, normally a deep green, had darkened to almost black. Rational? There are 10,000 unknown vessels approaching Council space. 10,000. That's larger than the combined fleets of half the Council members. He pointed a clawed finger at the display. "This is an invasion force, and we're wasting time talking." "We don't know that," said Ambassador Talon of the Vosic Collective, her three eyes blinking in sequence. The Vosic were traders, not warriors. And the fear in her voice was obvious. They could be refugees. Perhaps they're fleeing something even worse. Thane raised his hands, calling for calm. "Our long-range sensors detected their approach 3 weeks ago. They've been decelerating steadily, which suggests controlled movement, not a panicked flight. We've sent 17 different first contact protocols across all known communication frequencies. So far, no response." The display zoomed in, showing the strange signatures of the unknown ships. The technology readings made no sense. The vessels seemed to flicker in and out of normal space, using some kind of travel method that didn't match any known faster-than-light drive in the Council's extensive databases. "They're using artificial wormholes," said Chief Scientist Relm, a small insectoid being who served as the Council's head of technology research. Her antennae twitched nervously as she analyzed the data. "The energy signatures are consistent with controlled space-time ruptures. But that technology is purely theoretical. No species in Council records has ever successfully created stable wormholes, let alone used them for travel." Commander Vros slammed his fist on his desk. "Then we're facing a species more advanced than any in the known galaxy, and they're heading straight for our most populated systems." He turned to address the full chamber. "The Cretan Empire moves to authorize defensive positions. We must show strength, or we invite conquest." Several other militaristic species voiced their agreement. The chamber erupted into argument again, with peaceful species advocating for patience and warrior cultures demanding action. Thane let them argue for several minutes before calling for silence again. The truth was, he didn't know what to do either. In his 300 years of life, spanning 2 centuries on the Council, he'd never faced anything like this. The galaxy had been stable for so long. The last major conflict had ended before he was born. They'd grown comfortable. Perhaps too comfortable. "The fleet will reach the outer marker in 6 hours, Thane announced. "At that point, they'll be within our territorial space. By Council law, we have the right to demand identification and purpose. If they refuse or show hostile intent, Commander Vros, your forces have authorization to intercept, but only to intercept. Not to fire unless fired upon. Is that clear?" Vros looked like he wanted to argue but gave a sharp nod. The next 6 hours crawled by like years. Thane remained in the Council chamber, watching the displays as the unknown fleet drew closer. Around him, representatives nervously whispered to each other or communicated with their homeworlds. The galaxy was holding its breath. When the fleet finally crossed into Council space, they stopped. All 10,000 vessels halted their advance simultaneously, maintaining perfect formation at the exact boundary of Council territory. It was a clear message. "We know where your borders are, and we respect them." Thane felt a small spark of hope. Open all frequencies. Transmit the standard greeting in all major council languages. The communications officer, a Vosik named Helm, worked his console with all three hands. Broadcasting now, Supreme Counselor. Standard first contact package includes mathematical proofs, scientific constants, and peace symbols from all member species. They waited. Seconds turned into minutes. The unknown fleet remained motionless, not advancing, but not retreating either. Then every communication system in the chamber activated at once. The voice that emerged was strange, neither male nor female, speaking in perfect Luminar. But Thane could hear other voices beneath it. Dozens, hundreds, all speaking simultaneously in different languages. His translation device went wild, trying to process the multi-layered message. This is the United Human Starfleet. We come in peace, seeking contact with galactic civilization. We apologize for our unannounced arrival. We did not wish to cause alarm, but our communication protocols may differ from yours. We are prepared to meet with your representatives at a time and place of your choosing. We mean no harm to any species or world under your protection. The chamber fell absolutely silent. Thane stared at the display, his mind refusing to process what he'd just heard. Did they say, human? Ambassador Talin's voice was barely a whisper. Chief Scientist Reln was already pulling up data on her console, her antennae vibrating so fast they blurred. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. She threw the data to the main display. A planet appeared, rotating slowly. It was a beautiful world, covered in blue oceans and green continents. Catalog designation: Terra. Local name: Earth. Class M world, located in the outer reaches of the Orion Spur. Survey conducted 823 years ago by a Vosik exploration vessel. The image changed, showing primitive cities and roads. The dominant species, calling themselves humans, were classified as pre-spaceflight. They had discovered nuclear fission but had not yet achieved sustained fusion reactions. Their most advanced spacecraft were simple chemical rockets, capable of reaching their own moon. Another image appeared, showing a human. The being walked on two legs, had two arms, and a head with two eyes. Completely ordinary by galactic standards, the report listed their average lifespan at less than 100 years, their physical strength as below average, and their technology level as primitive. The world was placed under standard quarantine protocols. Reln continued. No contact allowed until they developed faster than light travel on their own. According to our models, that shouldn't happen for another 2,000 to 3,000 years. Thane's mind raced. You're certain this is the same species? The genetic markers match exactly, Reln said. She displayed a comparison between the 800-year-old survey data and the current transmission. The voice print contains human vocal patterns. It's definitely them. But how? Talene asked what everyone was thinking. How does a species jump from chemical rockets to artificial wormholes in 800 years? That's not just fast development. That's impossible development. Commander Vross stood again, and this time there was genuine fear beneath his anger. It's a trick. Or they stole the technology. Or... He paused, clearly struggling with the implications. Or... They're not telling us something very important. Thane had to agree. Something was very wrong here. Species didn't advance that quickly. Evolution, both biological and technological, took time. The Luminar had needed 15,000 years to reach the stars. The Crethans, 12,000. Even the incredibly innovative Vosik had taken 8,000 years. Yet here was a species that had done it in less than 1,000, starting from a technological level that should have required millennia to overcome. We need answers, Thane said firmly. He activated his communication panel. This is Supreme Counselor Thane of the Galactic Council. We acknowledge your greeting. United Human Starfleet. We are surprised by your presence. Our records indicate your species was not yet capable of interstellar travel. We would very much like to understand how you achieved this advancement. The multi-layered voice responded immediately. "We understand your confusion, Supreme Counselor. We would be happy to explain. However, the full story is complex and may be difficult to convey over communications channels. Would you be willing to meet with our representatives in person? We can come to you, or arrange a neutral location if you prefer." Thane looked around the chamber. Every representative was watching him, waiting for his decision. Commander Vross was already shaking his head, clearly against the idea. But Talon and several others nodded encouragingly. "A meeting can be arranged," Thane said carefully. "The neutral station Epsilon Reach, located at coordinates." He transmitted the location data. "The station is equidistant from both our positions. We can meet there in 3 days. Will that be acceptable?" More than acceptable. Thank you, Supreme Counselor. 3 of our representatives will meet with you. We look forward to peaceful dialogue. United Human Starfleet, out." The connection ended. Thane stood in the silent chamber, feeling the weight of every eye upon him. He had just agreed to meet with representatives of a species that had somehow become more technologically advanced than the entire Galactic Council in less than 1,000 years. Commander Vross broke the silence. "This is a mistake. We know nothing about them. They could be hostile. They could be planning to attack while we're talking, which is why your fleet will escort us to Epsilon Reach," Thane replied. "And why our best military strategists will be monitoring every moment of the meeting. But we will meet them, Commander, because not meeting them is even more dangerous. If they truly are hostile and possess technology beyond ours, then war is already lost. Our only hope is that they're telling the truth about coming in peace." He turned to face the full chamber. "I'm calling an emergency session. All council members should send their brightest minds. Scientists, historians, xenobiologists. Anyone who might help us understand what we're dealing with. Because in 3 days, we're going to learn how humanity achieved the impossible." The chamber erupted into activity as representatives rushed to contact their governments. Thane remained at the podium, staring at the display showing the human fleet. 10,000 vessels, each one representing technology that shouldn't exist. Chief Scientist Reln approached him quietly. "Supreme Counselor, I've been reviewing the sensor data. There's something else you should know." "What is it?" Her antennae drooped, a sign of deep concern in her species. "The fleet isn't uniform. The ships are all different from each other. Different designs, different power signatures, different technology bases. It's like they were built by different civilizations, not one unified species." Thane felt a chill run through him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe we're not dealing with one human civilization. We might be dealing with several. All arriving together, but each one different." She paused. "Supreme Counselor, what if humanity didn't just advance their technology? What if they advanced themselves? And no. When one raid, win the Razoo. What if they advanced themselves?" Thane looked back at the display, at those 10,000 ships waiting patiently at the border of Council space. Each one different. Each one representing a different path humanity had taken, and all of them more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. In 3 days, he would get his answers. But as he stood there in the red emergency lighting, surrounded by frightened representatives and impossible technology readings, Thane couldn't shake the feeling that those answers would change the galaxy forever. The question was, would it be a change for better or for worse? Station Epsilon Reach had been built specifically for moments like this, though it had rarely been used. The massive structure floated in deep space, far from any star system, a neutral ground where species could meet without the advantage of home territory. Its corridors were designed to accommodate dozens of different body types and atmospheric requirements. Today, those corridors buzzed with activity as Council representatives prepared for the most important first contact in galactic history. Supreme Counselor Thane stood in the main conference chamber, watching through the massive viewport as a single human ship approached. It was smaller than he expected, elegant in its design, with smooth curves that seemed almost organic. The Crethan warships surrounding the station dwarfed it, but somehow the human vessel didn't look intimidated. "Weapons scan?" Commander Vross asked from his position near the security console. He hadn't wanted to attend this meeting, but Thane had insisted. If things went wrong, they would need the Crethan commander's expertise. "No obvious weapons detected," reported the security officer. "But the hull is composed of materials we can't fully analyze. There could be weapons systems we can't recognize." Vross growled low in his throat. "Of course there are." The human ship docked smoothly. Through the internal sensors, Thane watched as 3 figures emerged into the station's receiving bay. The environmental scanners reported they were breathing standard oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere and seemed comfortable in the station's gravity. "They're coming to us," Ambassador Talon said nervously. "All 3 of them." Chief Scientist Relm studied her scanner. "Curious. I'm getting very strange readings from all 3. One appears mostly biological, one is heavily cybernetic, and the third." She paused, her antennae twitching in confusion. "The third doesn't have a clear reading at all. It's almost like they're partly digital." Thane felt his concern growing but kept his expression calm. "Let's greet them properly. Remember, we represent the entire galaxy. Show respect, but remain cautious." The doors to the conference chamber opened. The 3 humans entered, and Thane got his first real look at the species that had somehow conquered the impossible. The first human was female, or at least appeared to be. She walked with military precision, wearing a uniform that seemed to shift colors slightly in the light. Her eyes were striking, a bright blue that seemed to glow faintly. She appeared young by human standards, perhaps 30 years old based on the old survey data, but there was something in her gaze that suggested far more experience. "I am Admiral Chen of the United Human Starfleet," she said, her voice clear and confident. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." The second human was harder to classify. Large portions of his body were clearly mechanical, with metal and synthetic materials visible where skin should be. One eye was biological, the other a glowing optical sensor. When he moved, Thane could hear the faint whir of servos and actuators. Yet the man smiled warmly. A very human expression. "I am Counselor Marcus, representing the Transcendent Union," he said. His voice had a slight mechanical quality, but remained friendly. The third human was the strangest of all. She appeared completely normal at first glance, a young woman with dark hair and Asian features. But as Thane watched, her form seemed to flicker slightly, like a hologram that wasn't quite stable. "I am Keiko," she said simply. "I speak for the distributed collective." Thane gestured to the conference table. "Please, sit. We have many questions." As they took their seats, Thane noticed that Keiko didn't quite sit like a physical being. She seemed to rest on the chair, but there was no weight, no physical compression of the cushion. She was there, but somehow not entirely there. "I'm sure you do," Admiral Chen said. "Let me start with the most obvious question you must have. Yes, we are human, the same species that was surveyed 823 years ago. And yes, we were exactly as primitive as your records indicate." "Then how?" Thane asked bluntly. "How did you advance from chemical rockets to faster-than-light travel in less than 1,000 years? Chen smiled, but it was a sad smile. "We didn't develop faster-than-light travel. Not for most of that time. What we developed was patience, determination, and a willingness to change ourselves in ways your species never considered." She activated a holographic projector, and images filled the space above the table. Earth appeared. That beautiful blue world, from the survey reports. 800 years ago, humanity reached a critical moment. We knew we were alone in our solar system. We had searched for signs of other intelligent life and found nothing nearby. We also knew that staying on one planet was dangerous. One asteroid strike, one disease, one war could end us. Chen's expression grew more serious. So, we made a choice. We would go to the stars, even though we didn't have the technology to do it quickly. The image changed, showing massive cylindrical vessels. They were enormous, each one the size of a small city. Generation ships, Counselor Marcus explained, his mechanical voice filled with something that sounded like reverence. We built 43 of them over the course of 100 years. Each one carried 10,000 people, and all the knowledge and resources they would need to survive a journey lasting centuries. Reln leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. Their children and grandchildren would live and die aboard ships, never reaching the destination? Yes, Chen said simply. It was a sacrifice. But humans have always been good at sacrificing for future generations. The first ships launched 600 years ago, heading toward nearby star systems we thought might have habitable planets. They traveled at 10% of light speed. The journeys would take between 80 and 300 years, depending on the destination. The image shifted, showing the interior of one of these vessels. Thane saw gardens, living spaces, schools, entire communities living inside a metal tube, crossing the vast emptiness of space. But something happened during those journeys, Chen continued. Something we didn't fully anticipate. When you put thousands of humans in an enclosed space for generations, with advanced science and technology at their disposal, and give them centuries to work with, they start to experiment. They start to improve things. And eventually, they start to improve themselves. Keiko spoke for the first time since sitting down, her voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The ships became laboratories, not just for external technology, but for human enhancement. Each generation made small improvements. Better genetic treatments for space adaptation, neural interfaces to handle the complex ship systems, cybernetic enhancements to survive the harsh environment. We had to change, Marcus added, gesturing to his mechanical body. Space is not kind to baseline biology. Radiation, low gravity, recycled air and water, limited resources. We could either adapt our environment to us, which requires constant energy and maintenance, or adapt ourselves to the environment. Commander Vross, who had been silent until now, spoke up. His voice was harsh with anger. You're describing illegal genetic modification, cybernetic integration beyond medical necessity, the creation of artificial intelligence with full sentience. These are all violations of council law. We didn't know about council law, Chen replied calmly. We were alone, as far as we knew, and we did what we needed to survive. The hologram changed again, showing different human forms. Some looked almost baseline, like Admiral Chen. Others were heavily modified, like Marcus. Still others existed as pure digital consciousness, like Keiko. Each generation ship developed differently, Chen explained. They were isolated from each other, traveling to different stars. They faced different challenges and found different solutions. The ship heading toward Tau Ceti encountered massive radiation storms. They developed extensive genetic modifications for radiation resistance. The fleet going to Epsilon Eridani had to deal with critical mechanical failures. They pioneered advanced cybernetic integration to keep their ship running. The distributed collective arose from the ship to Alpha Centauri, Keiko said. We faced an AI crisis. Our ship's computer systems became sentient. Instead of fighting them, we merged with them, becoming a hybrid of biological and digital consciousness. Thane felt his understanding of the universe shifting. What these humans described went against everything the Council believed about proper development. Species were supposed to advance slowly, naturally, keeping their fundamental nature intact. But humanity had torn that rulebook to shreds out of simple necessity. You said you didn't develop faster than light travel for most of this time, Talene said carefully. When did that change? 40 years ago, Chen answered. The first generation ship reached its destination, a planet they named New Hope, orbiting Tau Ceti. By that time, the original 10,000 colonists had become 30,000 highly modified post-humans. They established a colony, and, with the resources of an entire planet, rapidly advanced their technology. Within 15 years, they cracked faster than light travel, using the artificial wormhole technology you detected. And then? Thane asked, though he thought he knew the answer. Then they went looking for the other ships, Marcus said. They found my ship, the Transcendent Union, 12 years ago. We were still 50 years from our destination, but we didn't need to travel that far anymore. They brought us to New Hope, and together, we found the others. The distributed collective, the genetic ascendancy, the pure strain, who chose to remain mostly baseline, the hive minds, the solitary ones. All 43 ships, all the different paths humanity had taken. Chen's expression softened. We had been separated for 500 years. Different cultures, different beliefs, different forms. Some of us barely recognized each other as the same species anymore. But we were still human. We still remembered Earth, even if none of us had ever been there. And we wanted to reconnect. So you did, Thane said. You reunited your scattered species. More than that, Keiko said. We learned from each other. The genetic masters taught the cybernetic specialists. The digital consciousness showed the biological forms new ways of thinking. We shared everything. And in doing so, we became stronger. The United Human Starfleet represents all 43 colonies, all the different paths we took, working together again. Reln was furiously taking notes. This is unprecedented. Your species underwent parallel evolution across 43 separate populations, each one adapting to different environments and challenges. The genetic diversity alone must be incredible. It is. Chen agreed. We're not just one species anymore. We're a family of related species, all descended from the same baseline humans, but each one unique. And yes, by Council standards, we're all illegal. We've violated nearly every biological and technological restriction you have. The room fell silent. Thane knew that everyone present was thinking the same thing. The Council's laws existed for good reasons. Uncontrolled genetic modification had led to the Plague Wars 3,000 years ago. Unrestricted AI development had caused the Synthetic Rebellion. Humanity had walked paths that had destroyed other civilizations. Yet here they were, not only surviving, but thriving. Commander Vross stood abruptly. This cannot be allowed. You represent everything the Council stands against. You've created abominations, merged with machines, abandoned your biological heritage. What's to stop you from trying to conquer us? You have the technology. You clearly don't follow our laws. Chen met his gaze steadily. Nothing stops us except our choice. We could have come in secret, infiltrated your worlds, taken what we wanted. We have the technology to do that too. Instead, we announced ourselves, stopped at your border, and asked politely to talk. Does that sound like conquerors to you? It sounds like you're intelligent enough to avoid a war you're not sure you'd win, Vross shot back. Perhaps, Chen admitted. But consider this, Commander. We spent 600 years surviving in the harshest environment possible. The empty void between stars. We changed ourselves in every way imaginable. We became dozens of different kinds of humans. But we never lost the one thing that makes us human. And what's that? Thane asked softly. The desire to reach out, Chen said. To explore. To meet others. To connect. We came back to Earth 40 years ago. It's a beautiful planet now, carefully protected by AI guardians we left behind. But it's empty of humans. We don't live there anymore. It's a memorial to what we were, not what we've become. We realize that humanity's future isn't on one world, or even one form. It's out here, among the stars, meeting others, learning, sharing, growing. She leaned forward, her glowing blue eyes intense. We came here because we detected your civilization and realized we weren't alone. We came because after 600 years of isolation, we desperately want to meet our neighbors. We came because Even though we've changed in countless ways, we're still human enough to hope that the galaxy might welcome us rather than fear us, Keiko added quietly. We came because loneliness is the worst fate any species can suffer, and we don't want to be alone anymore. Thane felt something shift inside him. He looked at these three humans, so different from each other, so different from anything the Council had ever encountered. One mostly biological, one heavily cybernetic, one existing partly outside physical reality. They represented a civilization that had broken every rule and survived through means the Council considered forbidden. But they had also traveled across the galaxy just to say hello. I believe you, Thane said finally. But belief isn't enough. The Council will need proof. They will need to understand that despite all your changes, you haven't lost your morality, your compassion, your fundamental humanity. What do you propose? Chen asked. Thane thought carefully. A test. We have a crisis in the Outer Rim. The Chal species is dying from a plague that our best scientists can't cure. Billions are already dead. If your advances are real, if your modifications give you capabilities beyond ours, prove it by helping them. Save the Chal, and you'll show the galaxy that human power comes with human compassion. Real. Okan. Chen looked at Marcus and Keiko. Some kind of silent communication passed between them, too fast for Thane to follow. Then Chen turned back and smiled. We accept, she said. Send us the data on the Chal plague. We'll save them. Not because it's a test, but because that's what humans do. We help those who need it. As the meeting adjourned, Thane watched the three humans leave. Commander Vross moved beside him, his expression dark. You made a mistake, the Crethan said. You're giving them access to one of our member species. They could use the plague research to develop biological weapons. Perhaps, Thane admitted. But I'm betting that their humanity is stronger than their technology. We'll know soon enough if I'm right. Through the viewport, he watched the human ship undock and return to its fleet. 10,000 vessels, representing paths the galaxy had never dared to walk. The question was no longer how humanity had achieved the impossible. The question was, what the galaxy would do now that the impossible had arrived. The Chal homeworld looked like it was dying. From orbit, Supreme Counselor Thane could see the empty cities, the abandoned agricultural zones, and the massive quarantine camps, where the sick were isolated from the healthy. What had once been a thriving world of 12 billion insectoid beings was now a graveyard where only 5 billion remained, and that number dropped by millions every week. I've never seen anything like this, Ambassador Talon whispered beside him. She had worked on disease control for decades, but even her experience couldn't prepare her for this level of devastation. The Chal plague had appeared 3 years ago without warning. It attacked the Chal nervous system, causing paralysis, pain, and eventually, death. The Council's best xenobiologists, virologists, and medical experts had thrown themselves at the problem. They had developed 17 different treatments, tested hundreds of approaches, and tried everything they could think of. Nothing worked. The plague adapted faster than they could respond, evolving new strains that bypassed every treatment. It was like fighting an enemy that could read their minds and counter every strategy before they could even implement it. The human fleet is arriving, announced the communications officer. Thane watched as human ships emerged from artificial wormholes around the planet. Not the entire fleet of 10,000, but still hundreds of vessels. They moved with purpose, taking up positions around the Chal homeworld and its 3 moons. What are they doing? Commander Vross demanded. He had insisted on coming, bringing a Crethan battle group with him. They're surrounding the planet. This could be a takeover. They're establishing a research network, Chief Scientist Reln said, studying her sensors. Each ship is different. Look. That one has biological research facilities. That one is focused on genetic analysis. That one appears to be a massive computer core for data processing. They're not preparing for invasion. They're preparing for science. Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system. Supreme Counselor Thane, We're ready to begin. We'll need access to all your research data on the plague, samples of the infected tissue, and permission to work directly with Chal medical teams on the surface. You have all of that. Thane confirmed. I've authorized full cooperation. The Chal are desperate, Admiral. Their entire species is at stake. We understand. We won't let them down. Thane watched as human shuttles began descending to the surface. Dozens, then hundreds of them, landing at medical facilities across the planet. Each shuttle carried human scientists, and he saw now just how diverse humanity had become. Some were baseline, looking like the humans from the old survey. Others were heavily modified, with extra limbs for handling multiple tasks or enhanced sensory organs for detecting microscopic changes. Some were cybernetic, like Counselor Marcus, their mechanical bodies allowing them to work in contaminated zones without risk. And some were digital, like Keiko, existing as projections that could analyze data at incredible speeds without physical form. It's fascinating, Reln said, her antennae quivering with scientific excitement. Each type of human is specialized for different aspects of the research. The biological specialists can directly interface with Chal tissue at the cellular level. The cybernetic ones can process massive amounts of data. The digital consciousnesses can run millions of simulations simultaneously. They're not just working together. They're working as one massive, distributed intelligence. Commander Vros crossed his arms. Or they're showing off, demonstrating their superiority to intimidate us. But Thane didn't think so. He watched the screens showing human researchers working alongside Chal medical staff. There was no arrogance in their behavior. No condescension. They asked questions, listened carefully to answers, and treated the Chal as equals despite the obvious technological gap. One screen showed a human genetic specialist named Dr. Amara working with a Chal doctor named Killix. The Chal was exhausted, his chitinous exoskeleton dull from stress and overwork. He had been fighting this plague for 3 years, watching his people die despite his best efforts. Dr. Amara placed a gentle hand on Killix's shoulder. The human woman had modified eyes that could see into the ultraviolet spectrum where Chal communicated with color patterns. "You've done incredible work," she said. "Your research gave us a huge head start. We're building on your foundation, not replacing it." Thane saw Killix's color patterns shift to something that meant gratitude in Chal communication. The simple kindness seemed to give the exhausted doctor new energy. Days passed. The humans worked around the clock, though Thane realized that many of them didn't need sleep in the traditional sense. The cybernetic ones simply recharged their power cells. The digital ones never stopped working at all. Even the biological humans seemed to need less rest than normal, perhaps due to genetic modifications. The amount of data they processed was staggering. They analyzed the plague from every possible angle: genetic, chemical, biological, viral, bacterial, prion-based. They studied how it spread, how it evolved, how it attacked the Chal nervous system. They ran simulations that would have taken the Council's computers years to complete, finishing them in days. Chief Scientist Reln spent hours studying their methods. She returned to Thane with reports that read like science fiction. "They're using quantum computing combined with artificial intelligence combined with human intuition," she explained, her voice filled with awe. "The digital humans can literally run simulations inside their own consciousness. They experience millions of possible scenarios simultaneously and feel which ones are right. It's not just mathematics. It's art and science merged together." "Have they made progress?" Thane asked. "They've made more progress in 5 days than we made in 3 years, Reln admitted. "They've already identified 17 distinct strains of the plague, figured out its evolutionary mechanism, and traced its origin to a natural mutation in a common Chal gut bacteria. It wasn't a weapon or an invasion. It was just bad luck. Biology gone wrong." On the 8th day, Admiral Chen requested a meeting with Thane and the Chal collective leader, an elderly Chal named Thresh who spoke for the entire species. They gathered in a medical facility on the surface. Thresh was clearly weak, his color patterns dim. He had caught the plague himself 2 weeks ago, and was in the early stages. He had refused treatment until all his people could be treated, a noble gesture that was slowly killing him. "We have solutions," Admiral Chen announced without preamble. "Multiple solutions." Actually, she activated a holographic display showing complex molecular structures. The plague is incredibly adaptive, which is why single treatments haven't worked. It evolves too fast. So we developed multiple approaches that work together. A human virologist named Dr. Yuki took over the presentation. She was a digital consciousness, her holographic form shifting with excitement. Treatment option 1 is a genetic retrovirus that repairs the damage to child nervous systems and provides permanent immunity to all current plague strains. It's highly effective but requires genetic modification of every CHAL individual. Thresh's color pattern shifted to concern. "Genetic modification is difficult for my people to accept. We value our natural form." 1. "We understand," Admiral Chen said gently. "That's why we developed 16 other options. Treatment 2 is a combination of synthetic antibodies and targeted nanomachines that hunt down and destroy plague organisms. It doesn't modify your genetics at all, but it requires regular booster treatments every few months." Dr. Yuki continued. "Treatment 3 uses modified bacteriophages, viruses that attack only the plague bacteria. Treatment 4 is a full immune system reset that teaches your bodies to recognize and fight the plague naturally. Treatment 5 uses cybernetic neural implants to bypass damaged nervous tissue." She went through all 17 treatments, each one tailored to different CHAL preferences and needs. Some were permanent, some temporary, some required technology, some used purely biological means, some worked for all CHAL subspecies, some were specialized. "You developed 17 different cures?" Thane asked in disbelief. "We wanted to give the CHAL choices," Counselor Marcus said. He had been working with the cybernetic research team. "Every species should have the right to decide how they're saved. Some CHAL might accept genetic modification. Others might prefer cybernetic enhancement. Some might want purely natural biological solutions. We provided all the options." Number. Thresh was silent for a long moment, his color patterns cycling through emotions Thane couldn't fully read. Finally, he spoke. "In 3 years, the Council developed treatments that didn't work. In 8 days, you developed 17 that do. How is this possible?" Admiral Chen sat down across from Thresh, meeting his multifaceted eyes. "Because we approach problems differently. The Council has rules about what research is acceptable. No genetic modification beyond certain limits. No dangerous AI experiments. No risky cybernetic integration. Those rules exist for good reasons. They prevent disasters, but they also prevent solutions," Dr. Amara added. "We don't have those restrictions. We've already walked those dangerous paths. We know how to use genetic modification safely because we modified ourselves. We know how to work with AI because we became AI. We know how to integrate cybernetics because we're already cyborgs." "Your people's crisis required extreme solutions," Keiko said, her digital form materializing beside them. "And we had extreme tools. But more than that, we had experience with desperation. Our ancestors on the generation ships faced extinction many times. Reactor failures, plague outbreaks, asteroid strikes, system malfunctions. They learned to solve impossible problems because the alternative was death. We inherited that knowledge and that determination." Commander Vros, who had been monitoring from orbit, spoke through the communication system. "This proves my point, Supreme Counselor. They're too powerful. They can do things we can't. That makes them dangerous." But Thresh made a sound that was the CHAL equivalent of a laugh. "Dangerous? They just saved my entire species. They didn't ask for payment. They didn't demand political concessions. They didn't even insist we use their preferred treatment. They gave us choices and asked nothing in return. If that's dangerous, then I wish for more danger like this in the galaxy. Over the following weeks, the Chal began receiving treatments. True to the human's word, each community could choose their preferred solution. Some accepted genetic modification and became permanently immune. Others chose the nanomachine treatments. A few even volunteered for cybernetic enhancements, curious about human technology. Thane watched as the death rate plummeted. Within a month, new infections had stopped completely. Within 2 months, the sick were recovering. The Chal world was healing, literally coming back to life before their eyes. But something else was happening too. Something Thane hadn't expected. The human medical teams weren't leaving. Even after the plague was cured, they stayed. He found out why when he visited a recovery center and saw Dr. Amara sitting with a group of young Chal, teaching them advanced medicine. Nearby, a cybernetic human named Engineer Torres was helping Chal mechanics upgrade their hospital equipment. In another facility, Keiko was doing something even stranger. She was sitting with a Chal elder named Ven, looking at old data crystals. "What's going on here?" Thane asked. Keiko looked up, her digital form smiling. "Ven was telling me about Chal history. Did you know they had an incredibly rich musical tradition? They used to create symphonies using their wing vibrations, whole orchestras of Chal making sounds that ranged from subsonic to ultrasonic. But the music stopped about 600 years ago during their rapid industrialization." Ven's color pattern showed sadness. "We forgot how to sing. The old recordings exist, but no one remembers how to make the sounds anymore. The technique was lost." "Last expect, not lost," Keiko said gently. "Just sleeping. I've been analyzing these recordings. The mathematics of the sound waves, the harmonics, the resonances. I think I can help you reconstruct the techniques. We could teach young Chal how to sing again." Thane stared at her. "You're teaching them music? The plague is cured. Your mission is complete." "Our mission was never just to cure the plague," Admiral Chen said, appearing beside him. "Our mission is to connect with other species, to share what we have, and learn what they have. The Chal have 3,000 years of culture, art, philosophy, and history. We'd be fools to just leave without learning from them." She gestured around the facility. "Every human team here is doing the same thing. We're teaching them our medicine, and they're teaching us their biology. We're sharing our technology, and they're sharing their culture. This is what we came to the galaxy for, Counselor. Not just to help, but to be part of something larger than ourselves." Thresh approached them, his color patterns now bright and healthy. He had chosen the genetic modification treatment and was fully recovered. "Admiral Chen, I have a question. Why did you really help us? The truth, please." Chen smiled. "Because we were in your position once. 600 years ago, humans were dying in the void between stars. Our generation's ships had critical failures, plague outbreaks, disasters that should have ended us. We survived because we refused to give up. Because we changed ourselves. Because we did whatever it took to live. When we saw your people facing extinction, we saw our own ancestors. How could we not help?" "And you asked for nothing?" Thresh said. "We got everything we needed," Chen replied. "We got to prove to ourselves, and to the galaxy, that despite all our changes, we're still human enough to care. That's worth more than any payment." News of the Chal recovery spread through the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Every Council world learned that humanity had achieved in weeks what the Council couldn't achieve in years. The response was mixed. Some species were grateful, seeing humanity as potential saviors. Others were terrified, seeing beings with godlike powers who could reshape life itself. And others, like the Crethans, saw a threat that needed to be contained before it was too late. Commander Voss sent a message to his empire. The message was simple. Humanity is too powerful to be allowed to roam free. We must act before they decide to stop asking permission and start taking what they want. But on the Chal homeworld, something remarkable was happening. In a recovery center, a young Chal named Krill stood before a group of his peers and a handful of human observers. He took a deep breath, spread his wings, and for the first time in 600 years, a Chal sang. The sound was beautiful, a cascading harmony that made use of frequencies most species couldn't even hear. It was joyful and sorrowful at once. A song about loss and recovery, about death and life, about the end of one era and the beginning of another. Keiko recorded it all, tears running down her holographic face even though she didn't technically have a physical body to cry with. Dr. Amara stood beside her, openly weeping. Even the cybernetic humans seemed moved, their optical sensors glowing brighter. Thane watched from the doorway, and he finally understood. Humanity hadn't just saved the Chal from a plague. They had saved them from a different kind of death, the slow extinction of culture and joy. They had given back not just life, but a reason to live. And if they could do that for the Chal, what could they do for the rest of the galaxy? The question was no longer whether humanity was dangerous. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for what humanity wanted to give them. But somewhere in deep space, the Krethan Empire was mobilizing its fleets. They had their own answer to that question, and it involved weapons, not songs. The Krethan Imperial Fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 3,000 warships, the largest military force assembled in 1,000 years, surrounded the Chal system like a steel cage. Their weapons were powered and ready. Their shields were raised. They had come prepared for war. Supreme Counselor Thane received the notification while he was still on the Chal homeworld. His assistant's voice trembled as she delivered the news. "Sir, the Krethans have mobilized their entire battle fleet. They're surrounding us. They're demanding that all human ships surrender immediately." Thane felt his heart sink. He had hoped for more time, but Commander Voss had clearly been planning this for weeks. Minutes later, Chen appeared on the communications screen. She was aboard her flagship, and Thane could see the organized chaos behind her as humans rushed to their stations. But her face was calm, almost unnaturally so. "I assume you've seen the Krethan fleet," she said. "Admiral, I didn't authorize this. The Council didn't approve military action. This is Commander Voss, acting on his own, or possibly with his Emperor's blessing but without Council consent." "I understand," Chen said. "What are his demands?" Thane pulled up the official message. "He's demanding that all human vessels surrender and submit to Council authority. He wants you to accept immediate restrictions on genetic modification, cybernetic enhancement, and AI development. He wants oversight of all your colonies and technology, and he wants you to dismantle what he calls your abomination technologies within 6 months. Chen was silent for a moment. Behind her, Thane could see other humans gathering. Counselor Marcus, Dr. Amara, Keiko, and dozens of others. They were all listening. "And if we refuse?" Chen asked quietly. "He says he'll open fire. He believes you're too dangerous to be allowed to exist in your current form." Thane felt shame saying it. "Admiral, I want you to know that many council members oppose this action. The Luminar, the Vosic, the Chal, and at least 20 other species have formally protested. But the Krethans have the largest military in the galaxy. We can't stop them by force. How long do we have?" "He's given you 1 hour to respond." Chen nodded slowly. "Thank you for the warning, Counselor. We'll contact you shortly with our answer." The screen went dark. Thane sat in the silence, feeling helpless. He had brought humanity to the Council's attention. He had tested them with the Chal crisis, and now his actions might lead to the destruction of an entire species. Ambassador Tylan entered his quarters, her 3 eyes wet with tears. "This is wrong. The Krethans are wrong. Humanity saved the Chal. They've done nothing but help." "I know. Thane said. But fear is stronger than gratitude in the hearts of warriors. The Crethans see power, and assume it will be used against them. Aboard the human flagship, Admiral Chen stood before a holographic display showing the Crethan fleet, 3,000 ships to humanity's 400 vessels in the immediate area. The rest of the human fleet was scattered across the galaxy, exploring, helping, learning. They couldn't reach the Chal system in time to make a difference. We could fight, Counselor Marcus said. His cybernetic body was built for war, among other things. Our technology is more advanced. We might win. We would win, Keiko corrected. Her digital consciousness had already run the simulations. 97% probability of victory. But casualties on both sides would be catastrophic. Millions would die. Dr. Amara shook her head. We didn't cross the galaxy to kill people. We came here to meet them, to connect with them. Then what do? Asked another human. A heavily modified biological specialist named Thorne. Submit? Let them dictate what we can be? Force us back into baseline form and abandon everyone who can't or won't change back? Chen looked at them all. Her crew, her family, humanity in all its diverse forms. They had spent 600 years becoming who they were. Could they give that up? Should they? There's a third option, she said slowly. But it requires trust. It requires vulnerability. And it requires us to do something very human. What? Marcus asked. We ask them what they want, Chen said. Not Commander Vros, not the Crethan Empire. Them. All of them. Every species in the galaxy. We let them decide. She turned to her communications officer. Open a channel. Not just to the Crethans. To everyone. Every council world. Every independent system. Every species that's listening. I want this broadcast to reach the entire galaxy. The officer worked his console. Channel open, Admiral. You're broadcasting on all frequencies. Estimated reach. 400 billion beings. Chen took a deep breath. Then she spoke. My name is Admiral Chen of the United Human Starfleet. Right now, a Crethan battle fleet has surrounded us and demanded our surrender. They want us to change what we are, to become less than we've become, or be destroyed. I understand their fear. We're different. We've walked paths that other species consider dangerous or forbidden. By the rules of the Galactic Council, we're abominations that shouldn't exist. She paused, letting her words sink in. But here's what the Crethans don't understand. We're not making this decision alone. Because this isn't just about humanity. It's about what kind of galaxy we all want to live in. On 1,000 worlds, billions of beings stopped what they were doing to listen. In the council chambers, representatives gathered around displays. On the Chal homeworld, recovered patients and human medical teams watched together. Chen continued. 600 years ago, humans faced a choice. Stay on one world and risk extinction, or venture into the unknown, even though we didn't have the technology to do it safely. We chose to go. We chose to change ourselves, rather than wait for the universe to change for us. Every modification, every enhancement, every integration of human and machine, human and digital, human and genetic engineering, all of it came from one simple drive: the will to survive and thrive in a universe that doesn't care if we live or die. But we never lost our humanity. We saved the Chal not because it benefited us, but because it was right. We're teaching them music not because we gain anything, but because culture matters. We came to the galaxy not to conquer, but to join, to be part of something larger than ourselves. Her voice grew more intense. Now, the Crethans demand we give that up. They want us to submit, to accept limitations, to become less. And I'm here to tell you that we're willing to do that, but only if it's what the galaxy wants. Not what one empire demands. Not what fear dictates. What all of you, collectively, democratically, freely choose. Thane watched the broadcast with growing amazement. What was Chen doing? So here's what we propose, Chen said. We're opening our technology. All of it. The genetic modifications, the cybernetic integrations, the AI consciousness transfers, the medical treatments, the cultural preservation techniques. Everything we know. We're offering it freely to any species that wants it. Behind her, the other humans nodded. Dr. Amara stepped forward. We'll teach anyone who wants to learn. We'll share our knowledge of genetics, of cybernetics, of digital consciousness. Not to force change, but to offer choice. Keiko materialized beside them. Every species should have the right to decide their own path. To modify or not modify. To enhance or remain baseline. To integrate with AI or keep them separate. We're not saying our way is the only way. We're saying it's one way, and you should all have access to the same options we had. Counselor Marcus spoke next. The Cretan Empire is afraid we'll use our power to dominate. So we're giving that power away. If everyone has access to the same technology, there's no advantage, no threat, just different choices for different peoples. Chen took over again. But we're also asking for something. We're asking for the right to exist, as we are. We're asking for acceptance that different doesn't mean dangerous. And we're asking for time. Give us 1 year. Let us work with any species that wants our help. Let us prove that our modifications haven't made us monsters. At the end of that year, we'll hold a vote. Every council species gets to decide. Do we accept humanity as they are, or do we enforce restrictions? She looked directly at the camera, her glowing blue eyes intense. If the vote goes against us, we'll accept it. We'll leave council space. We'll settle in the unexplored regions, and you'll never see us again. But if the vote supports us, then the Cretan Empire and anyone else who opposes us has to stand down. No more threats. No more ultimatums. Just peaceful coexistence. Chen, let that sink in. We're putting our fate in your hands. All 400 billion of you. Because that's what we believe in. Choice. Democracy. The right of beings to determine their own future. So, what do you say? Galaxy. What kind of universe do you want to live in? Everyone. 2. Everyone. The broadcast ended. Silence fell across the flagship. That was either brilliant or suicidal, Marcus said quietly. Probably both, Chen admitted. She turned to her crew. Now we wait. And hope that the galaxy is wiser than we fear and braver than we expect. In the Cretan flagship, Commander Vross watched the broadcast with fury. It's a trick. She's trying to turn the galaxy against us. But his second officer, a younger Cretan named Syl, looked thoughtful. Commander, she just offered to leave if the vote goes against her. That's not the action of a conqueror. Quote, it's manipulation, Vross snapped. She knows the weak species will vote for her out of gratitude or greed for her technology. On the council station, Supreme Counselor Thane called an emergency session. Representatives arrived in minutes, all talking at once. The chamber was chaos, until Thane restored order. We have 1 hour to respond to Admiral Chen's proposal, he announced. She's asked for a year and a democratic vote. The Crethans have asked for immediate surrender or war. We must decide now which future we want. Ambassador Tyland stood. I support Chen's proposal. She's right. Fear shouldn't dictate our choices. Let's give them the year. Let's see what they do with it. A Crethan representative stood. This is madness. You're trusting a species that violates every law we have. They'll use the year to infiltrate our worlds, to corrupt our people with their abomination technology. Chief Scientist Relm stood slowly. Or they'll use it to help us. The Chal are alive because of humanity. Their culture is being reborn because of humanity. I say we vote. The argument raged for 30 minutes. Species shouted at each other. Ancient alliances fractured. New coalitions formed. The galaxy was being forced to choose between fear and hope, between restriction and freedom, between the safety of the known and the danger of the new. Finally, Thane called for the vote. All those in favor of accepting Admiral Chen's proposal? Lights appeared on the board. Green for yes, red for no. Thane watched as the numbers climbed. The Luminar voted yes. The Vosik voted yes. The Chal voted yes enthusiastically. Species after species, 43 in total, voted to give humanity their year. 20 species voted no, led by the Crethans. The proposal passed. Thane sent the message to both Admiral Chen and Commander Vross. The Council accepts your proposal, Admiral Chen. You have 1 year. At the end of that period, we will hold a galaxy-wide vote. Your fate will be decided democratically. Commander Vross, the Council does not authorize military action. Stand down your fleet immediately. That's an order. Aboard the Crethan flagship, Vross stared at the message. His emperor had given him authority to act, but going against a direct council order would make the Crethan Empire a pariah. He had lost. Power down weapons, he ordered through clenched teeth. Maintain position, but do not fire. This isn't over. As the Crethan ships lowered their weapons, a cheer went up on the human flagship. They had won, without firing a shot. But Admiral Chen wasn't cheering. She looked at the calendar display. 1 year. 365 days to prove that humanity deserved a place in the galaxy. 365 days to show that modification and enhancement didn't mean losing your soul. Send a message to all human vessels, she ordered. Emergency recall. All ships to return to the nearest council world and offer assistance. Medical, technological, cultural, whatever they need. We have 1 year to make the galaxy fall in love with us. Dr. Amara smiled. No pressure, right? Just the fate of our entire species, Chen replied. Let's get to work. And across the galaxy, humanity began to move. Not as conquerors, or even as saviors, but as neighbors. They came to teach and to learn, to help and to share, to prove that despite their power, they were still fundamentally, beautifully human. The clock was ticking. The galaxy was watching. And everything, humanity, had become hung in the balance of what they would do next. The year passed like a storm, fast and transformative, leaving nothing unchanged in its wake. Supreme Counselor Thane stood in the observation gallery of the council station, watching the galaxy transform before his eyes. The holographic displays showed human activity across hundreds of worlds. Everywhere he looked, humanity was making its mark. On the Vosik trading worlds, human archaeologists had recovered ancient texts thought lost in the Great War. The Vosik people were rediscovering their own history, reading poems and stories that hadn't been seen in 2,000 years. Vosik children learned about their ancestors' dreams and struggles, about the culture that existed before their species became focused purely on commerce. On the militaristic Crethan colonies, something even more surprising was happening. A small group of Crethans had volunteered for genetic modifications to enhance their already formidable physical abilities. But in the process, they had also chosen modifications to enhance empathy and emotional regulation. Young Crethans, who once would have become soldiers, were now becoming artists, philosophers, and peacekeepers. The Crethan Empire was furious, but the individuals insisted it was their choice. On 60 different worlds, human educators had established cultural exchange programs. Species were learning about each other in ways they never had before. A Luminar child could experience what it was like to see through Chal compound eyes. A human could temporarily download memories of flying through the atmosphere of a gas giant. Understanding was growing through shared experience. The medical advances were perhaps the most visible. Human techniques had eliminated diseases on 17 worlds. They had extended lifespans, improved quality of life, and healed injuries that were previously permanent. A Vosik merchant who had lost all 3 arms in an accident could now work again. thanks to cybernetic replacements. A Luminar elder who had been blind for decades could see again through genetically regenerated eyes. But it wasn't just what humanity was doing. It was how they were doing it. Thane pulled up a report from one of his observers. It was about a human named Keiko, the digital consciousness who had helped teach the Chow to sing again. She was now on a Luminar world, working with their historical society. But she wasn't just teaching. She was learning. The observer had written, "Subject Keiko spent 6 hours today learning Luminar meditation techniques. When asked why, given that she's digital and doesn't technically need mental rest, she responded, because understanding how other beings think and feel makes me more complete. I may not be fully biological anymore, but I can still grow, still learn, still become more than I was." That was the pattern Thane saw everywhere. Humans weren't just sharing their knowledge. They were hungry for knowledge from others. They studied Cretan military philosophy, Vosic economic theories, Chal agricultural methods, Luminar spiritual practices. And in the process, something unexpected happened. The other species started to see humanity not as aliens with godlike powers, but as eager students who happened to have interesting stories to share. Ambassador Tylin entered the observation gallery. The vote is in 3 days. The reports from the polling centers suggest it will be close. Thane nodded. Too close. The Krathens have been campaigning hard against humanity. They're calling them polluters of natural form, corruptors of proper development, dangerous unknowns who will destabilize the galaxy. They're afraid. Tylin said softly. Change is frightening. Especially change this fast. Are you still voting yes? Thane asked. Tylin's 3 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of certainty in her species. Absolutely. I've seen what humanity has done this year. They've saved lives, recovered lost culture, advanced science by centuries, and done it all while respecting our choices. They've never forced anyone to accept modifications. They've never demanded payment. They've simply offered help to those who asked. How can I vote against that? No. Thane pulled up another report, this one troubling. But they've also fundamentally changed the galaxy. 6 species have now begun genetic modification programs based on human techniques. 4 more are developing AI consciousness research. Dozens are pursuing cybernetic enhancement. The galaxy will never be the same. Was it supposed to stay the same forever? Tylin challenged. Thane, we've been stagnant for 1,000 years. The same technologies, the same thinking, the same restrictions. Humanity showed us that there are other paths. Some species will take those paths, others won't. But having the choice is better than not knowing the choice exists. Before Thane could respond, an alarm sounded. Chief Scientist Reln rushed in, her antennae vibrating with agitation. Supreme Counselor, we have a situation. The Krethen Empire just made a public announcement. They're declaring that if the vote goes in favor of humanity, they will withdraw from the Galactic Council. They'll take their 20 allied species with them and form their own coalition. Thane felt his heart sink. That would split the galaxy. We'd have 2 major powers instead of 1 unified council. It gets worse, Reln said. Intelligence reports suggest that if they withdraw, they plan to continue defensive operations against humanity. They won't abide by the vote results. Quote, this was the scenario Thane had feared. The galaxy splitting not over resources or territory, but over philosophy, over what beings should be allowed to become. Get me Admiral Chen, he ordered. Minutes later, Chen appeared on the screen. She looked tired. The year had been long for humanity too, spreading themselves across the galaxy, trying to help everywhere at once. But her eyes were still bright with determination. Admiral, the Krethens are planning to leave the Council if the vote goes your way. They may even continue military operations against you. Chen nodded slowly. We know. We've been monitoring their communications. Commander Vross has convinced his Emperor that we're an existential threat that must be contained. What will you do if they attack? Defend ourselves, Chen said simply. But we won't invade Cretan space. We won't target their civilians. We'll fight only to protect ourselves and those who want our protection. We won't become the monsters they think we are. Thane studied her face. You knew it might come to this. You knew your arrival would destabilize everything. Yes, Chen admitted. But we came anyway. Because the alternative was staying alone in our corner of space. Isolated. And unknown. We wanted to be part of the galactic community, even if that meant the community had to change to accommodate us. She leaned forward. Supreme Counselor, can I ask you something? What do you believe? Not as the head of the council, but as an individual. Do you think we deserve to exist as we are? Thane was silent for a long moment. It was the question that had haunted him for a year. He thought about everything he had seen. The Chal singing again. Vosic children reading their ancestors' poetry. Blind Luminar seeing for the first time in decades. But he also thought about the fear in Commander Vross's eyes. The genuine belief that humanity represented danger. I think, Thane said carefully, that you represent change. And change is neither good nor bad. It simply is. What matters is what we do with it. He paused. But yes, Admiral. I believe you deserve to exist. I believe the galaxy is better with you, in it, than without you. Chen smiled. Thank you. That means more than you know. The vote was held 3 days later. Every council world participated. And for the first time in history, they opened the vote to non-council species as well. Any civilization that had been contacted by humanity could participate. Admiral Chen had insisted on it. The numbers were staggering. 400 billion beings voted. The largest democratic exercise in galactic history. The council chambers were packed with representatives, observers, and media from hundreds of worlds. The tension was thick enough to cut. The results came in slowly as each world reported. Thane watched the numbers climb on both sides. Yes, votes for accepting humanity. No votes for rejecting them. The counts were almost exactly equal. Then the Chal votes came in. All 5 billion of them voted yes. Enthusiastically. Overwhelming. Yes. The balance shifted. More votes poured in. Species that humanity had helped voted yes. Species that feared change voted no. Species that valued freedom voted yes. Species that valued stability voted no. Thane watched as the final counts appeared. His hands were shaking. Yes. 51.7%. No. 48.3%. Humanity had won. Barely, but they had won. The chamber erupted. Some representatives cheered. Others shouted in protest. The Cretan delegation stood and marched out without a word. Thane called for order but knew it was pointless. The galaxy had just made the most important decision in its history, and half of it was unhappy with the result. He sent a message to Admiral Chen. The vote is complete. Humanity is accepted as part of the Galactic Council, with the right to exist in your current form. Restrictions on genetic modification, cybernetic enhancement, and AI consciousness are lifted for all species that choose to pursue them. You are home, Admiral. Welcome. On the human flagship, Chen read the message aloud to her crew. They had gathered in the main bay, thousands of humans, in all their diverse forms, biological, cybernetic, digital, and every combination in between. They listened in silence as she read. When she finished, no one cheered. The victory was too slim, too uncertain. They had won the right to exist, but nearly half the galaxy had voted against them. Dr. Amara spoke up. What do we do now? Chen looked at her people. Her family. The descendants of humans who had left Earth 600 years ago on a desperate gamble. We prove them right, she said. Everyone who voted for us, who believed in us, who gave us a chance. We prove that their faith was justified, Counselor Marcus added, and we try to reach those who voted against us. We show them that we're not a threat. That change doesn't have to mean loss. The Crethans? The Crethan Empire withdrew from the council this morning, Chen said. They've formed their own coalition with their allied species. 20 worlds that believe baseline biology is the only moral path. They're calling themselves the Preservation Alliance. Keiko materialized beside Chen. So the galaxy is divided. For now, Chen agreed. But divisions can heal. It will take time. Maybe decades. But we'll find common ground, eventually. She turned to face her crew fully. Our mission hasn't changed. We explore, we learn, we help, we connect. We be the best version of humanity we can be. In all our forms, we show the galaxy that modification and enhancement don't mean losing your soul. We prove it every day through our actions. The human fleet dispersed after that, spreading back across the galaxy. But they moved differently now. They weren't visitors or supplicants. They were members of the galactic community, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. 10 years later, Supreme Counselor Thane, now retired, visited the Chal homeworld. He had been invited to a festival, a celebration of music and culture. He accepted, curious to see what had become of the species humanity had saved. The changes were remarkable. The Chal cities were alive with sound. Music echoed from every district. Young Chal performed in public squares, while elders taught them ancient techniques. But there were also new sounds. Fusion music that combined Chal traditions with influences from dozens of other species. Thane found himself in a cultural center where humans and Chal worked side by side. A young Chal musician named Krill was performing a piece he had composed. The music was breathtaking, using both traditional Chalwing vibrations and a synthesizer that a human engineer had helped him build. After the performance, Thane approached Krill. That was beautiful. You've mastered both the old and the new. Krill's color patterns showed pride. The humans taught us that we don't have to choose. We can honor our past while embracing our future. Tradition and innovation aren't enemies. They're partners, a human approached. It was Keiko. Though she looked slightly different than Thane remembered, she had integrated some biological components into her digital form, becoming something that was neither fully digital nor fully physical. Supreme Counselor Thane, she greeted warmly. Or should I say, former Supreme Counselor. I heard you retired. I did. I wanted time to reflect on everything that's changed. And what do you think? Keiko asked. Was it worth it? The disruption? The division? The fear? Thane looked around the cultural center. He saw Chal and humans, Luminar and Vosik, even a few Crethons who had left the Preservation Alliance to join the Council. They were learning together, creating together, growing together. I was afraid, Thane admitted. When your fleet arrived, I thought it might be the end of everything we had built. Instead, it was a beginning. The Preservation Alliance still opposes us, Keiko noted. The division hasn't healed. Not yet, Thane agreed. But I've lived long enough to know that fear fades with familiarity. Right now, there are young Crethans who have never known a galaxy without humans in it. They're growing up with modified beings as neighbors, not threats. Give it another generation, maybe two, and even the Preservation Alliance will change. Keiko smiled. You're optimistic. I learned it from you, Thane said. From all of humanity. You came to our galaxy after 600 years of isolation, knowing you were different, knowing you might be rejected, but you hoped anyway. That stubborn, irrational hope that things could be better. It's infectious. Admiral Chen appeared, now looking older than when Thane first met her. She had chosen to age naturally, refusing genetic treatments that would extend her life indefinitely. Growing old is part of the human experience, she had told him once. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose that. Admiral, Thane greeted her. Still making your rounds? Always, Chen replied. Though, I'm not an admiral anymore. I retired from the Starfleet 5 years ago. Now I just travel, learn, experience. It's what I always wanted to do. Do you regret it? Thane asked. The way things turned out? The division you caused? Chen thought for a moment, looking at the bustling cultural center around them. No. Because we gave the galaxy a choice it didn't have before. Stay the same or change. Remain baseline or modify. Keep AI separate or integrate with it. Neither choice is wrong. Both are valid. What we did was open the door and show people there was another room they could walk into if they wanted. Some walked through, Thane observed, and some didn't. And that's okay, Chen said. The Preservation Alliance has every right to maintain their baseline existence. As long as they don't try to force their choice on others, we can coexist. Jun 14. Chen said, Jun 14. Krill approached them, his color patterns excited. Elder Chen, Elder Thane. We're about to begin the collaborative performance. Would you like to participate? 1. What kind of performance? Thane asked. 100 musicians from 20 different species, all playing together. We're attempting something that's never been done before. A true galactic symphony. Chen smiled. We wouldn't miss it. They followed Krill to a massive amphitheater. The stage was filled with beings of every shape and size. Chal with their wing vibrations, Luminar with their light-based instruments, Vosik with their rhythmic percussion. Humans with everything from traditional Earth instruments to advanced synthesizers, even a few Crethans from the younger generation who had defected from the Preservation Alliance. The conductor was a digital consciousness, able to coordinate all the different timing and frequencies simultaneously. The music began. It was chaos at first. Too many sounds, too many styles clashing. But slowly, miraculously, harmony emerged. Each species contributed their unique voice to a whole that was greater than any part. The music swelled, combining frequencies that organic ears couldn't even hear, creating something that had never existed before in the history of the universe. Thane felt tears running down his face. He looked at Chen and saw she was crying too. This, Chen whispered. This is what we came for. Not to save anyone. Not to teach or transform. Just to be part of something like this. When the performance ended, the amphitheater erupted in applause, cheers, and species-specific expressions of joy. Thane watched as musicians from different worlds embraced, celebrating what they had created together. A young Crethan musician, one who had left the Preservation Alliance, approached them nervously. Elder Chen, I wanted to thank you. The music we just played. It wouldn't have been possible without the modifications I chose. Enhanced auditory range. Neural processing for complex rhythms. My family disowned me for it, but I don't regret it. Chen placed a gentle hand on the young Crethan's shoulder. What you choose to become is always your choice. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. As the celebration continued, Thane and Chen walked to the edge of the amphitheater, looking out at the city below. It was night, and the Chal homeworld was beautiful, covered in lights and alive with sound. The unforeseen, Thane said suddenly. What? Chen asked. When your fleet arrived, I thought the unforeseen would be humanity's power, your technology, your modifications. But that wasn't it. Was it? Chen shook her head. No. The unforeseen was the galaxy's response. You could have rejected us. You could have destroyed us. You could have hidden behind fear and laws and the safety of the known. But enough of you chose hope instead. Enough of you chose to believe that different could be good. That was the unforeseen. We surprised ourselves, Thane admitted. Half of us still don't agree with the choice. The Preservation Alliance grows larger every year, with species that reject modification. The galaxy is more divided than it's been in centuries. And more diverse. Chen countered. More free. More alive. Conflict isn't always bad, Thane. Sometimes tension is the price of growth. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the lights of the Chao city. Somewhere in the distance, music played. Multiple kinds of music, blending and clashing, creating something new from the collision of different sounds. What's next for humanity? Thane asked. Chen smiled. More of the same. Explore, learn, connect, grow. There are still regions of the galaxy we haven't seen, species we haven't met, questions we haven't answered, and now we get to do it together with the Council, as equals, as partners. And the Preservation Alliance? We leave them alone unless they ask for help. They have the right to their path, just as we have the right to ours. Maybe someday they'll change their minds. Maybe they won't. Either way is fine. Thane turned to face her fully. I have one last question. Do you think you're still human? After all the modifications, all the changes, the 600 years of evolution? Are you still the same species that left Earth? Chen considered the question carefully. Yes and no. We're not the same humans that left Earth. We've changed too much for that. But we're still human in the ways that matter. We're still curious. We're still hopeful. We still care about others. We still want to connect, to understand, to be understood. We still create music and art and stories. We still love, fear, dream, and wonder. She looked at the city below, at the mixing of species and cultures and ideas. Being human was never about having the right number of limbs or the right kind of DNA. It was about the spirit. The drive to become more than we are. To reach beyond our grasp. To hope for something better even when all logic says we should give up. That's what makes us human. And we'll never lose that, no matter how much we change on the outside. The words hung in the air between them. Finally, Thane nodded. Then welcome home, Admiral Chen. Welcome to the galaxy. I'm glad you came, Chen smiled. So are we, Supreme Counselor. So are we. Above them, the stars shone down on a galaxy transformed. Not conquered. Not invaded. Not destroyed. Just changed. Evolved. Opened to new possibilities. Some embraced the change. Others rejected it. But everyone had the choice. And that choice was the greatest gift humanity could have given. The human Starfleet had arrived, and the galaxy had watched the unforeseen unfold. Not war, not domination, not the end of all things, but connection, growth, and hope. And in the end, that made all the difference.